And so that brings us to this question. The title of the episode is Sliwa Dropping Out? Because there have been calls from both sides of the aisle for the Republican candidate in this three-way race, Curtis Sliwa, to drop out of the race. And the premise of that is that he's so far behind mamdani that he doesn't stand a chance to win. And yet, if he drops out, his voters would most likely vote for Andrew Cuomo and not for Zohran Mamdani. And isn't Andrew Cuomo a better person? Isn't he the lesser of two evils if you compare him to Zohran Mamdani? And I will confess to you, you haven't heard me make that case because I can't. I can't make that case because I don't know the answer to that. Is Andrew Cuomo the lesser of two evils if you compare him side by side with Zohran Mamdani? Is he actually the lesser of two evils? This is not a rhetorical question. This is a question I have asked myself 100 times, because here's the thing. If you make a stack of policy positions, Andrew Cuomo's on the left and Zohran Mamdani is on the right, there is no doubt that philosophically, Zohran Mamdani is much worse than Andrew Cuomo. There is no doubt that Andrew Cuomo, on paper, if you are just comparing their particular stated positions on certain policies, that he is the lesser of two evils. Certainly, he's not an open communist. He's not an open socialist. He doesn't want to remake New York City in the image of Muslims like Zohran Mamdani does. So sure, you could make that argument that Andrew Cuomo is the lesser of two evils. And I'm all about these political calculations. I was one of the leading voices last summer, or this time last year actually, arguing for very religious pro-lifers in the Republican Party to vote for Donald Trump, not because they had to agree with his position fully on abortion, for example, or the definition of marriage as one man and one woman, not because they had to agree with those things, not because they had to like Donald Trump's past or the way that he speaks in his posts on Truth Social, but because he was very obviously, not even comparatively, the lesser of the two evils compared to Kamala Harris. Like, my goodness, Kamala Harris didn't support any restrictions on abortion. Donald Trump supports some, not as much as me, but more than Kamala Harris. So wouldn't you want the lesser of the two evils? And I have to say, last year at this time, that's not the way that I personally viewed Donald Trump. I think he's not as pro-life as me, but I think he's a great president. I didn't hold my nose and vote for him. But I made the argument that people who were feeling that way should hold their nose and vote for him because he was inarguably the lesser of two evils. And that's a normal political calculation. There's not been a political candidate that I've ever cast my ballot for who I agreed with on everything. It was always, well, this person's better than this person, so that's who I cast my vote for. It's not that you're endorsing the parts of that candidate that you don't like. It's that you think that candidate will better protect against the harm caused by the worst candidate. This is a very valid, logical, moral framework to cast your ballot. And you would think, okay, well, why not apply it to this particular case? And I've had a hard time applying that framework to this case because while on paper, Andrew Cuomo is clearly less of a radical than Zohran Mamdani, might seem like he's the lesser of two evils, that's actually just hypothetical. Because Zohran Mamdani, even though he verbalizes these extremely radical, dangerous, anti-American viewpoints, he hasn't been terribly effective in doing any of that stuff. He just says it. And he has a large platform and words matter. But his policies haven't yet hurt people. But Andrew Cuomo's have. Andrew Cuomo presided over the tyrannical disaster of COVID in New York City. Over 10,000 senior citizens in New York City were essentially sent to their deaths by then Governor Andrew Cuomo because he forced them to go back to nursing homes and they died of COVID there. And his record, Andrew Cuomo's record, even if his words are less radical than Zohran's, is Andrew Cuomo's record not more deadly? And so when I hear this argument coming from some people on the right that Curtis Sliwa should drop out, I'm like, no. You're thinking about this all wrong. Curtis Sliwa shouldn't drop out. Andrew Cuomo should drop out. Because Andrew Cuomo's voters obviously reject Zohran mamdani. That's why they're choosing the independent Andrew Cuomo over the Democrat, Zoran. So if Andrew Cuomo drops out, would his voters not migrate to Curtis Sliwa? Sliwa himself has made this argument, and you have to ask yourself, why are people on the right not taking this view? Why are they falling into the trap that it has to be either Andrew Cuomo or Zoran Mamdani? Why are they not taking the based view on this? Andrew Cuomo lost in the Democratic primary. He has no right to be in this race. He is an entitled brat who has never been held accountable for anything that he has inflicted on the people of New York City. Get out of the race. If Zoran Mamdani wins in New York City, it's not because Curtis Sliwa refused to drop out. It's because Andrew Cuomo refused to drop out. This is Sliwa himself. Take a listen.
All right, so Andrew Cuomo was just on the radio, said it's mathematically impossible for him to win if you stay in the race, but he said President Trump could call Ed Cox, the GOP chairman, and tell you to drop out. So let me start there. If he were to call you, Ed Cox, and tell you to drop out, would you?
No. See, Andrew Cuomo doesn't understand the meaning of no. And by the way, he's already tossed in the towel by saying that. He's already given up, going no mas, no mas. That's why it's time for him to drop out. He lost the primary. He's just admitted he can't win if I'm in the race. So why not? Why not Andrew Cuomo drop out, go to the Hamptons with his billionaire friends, and leave it to be a one-on-one with
He's basically saying that they want Mamdani to win, to use as a talking point for Republicans in the midterms and for the next presidential campaign. And that's why they want you to stay in the race.
Oh, wow, boys, he getting conspiratorial. Andrew, run your race. If you ran your race, you would have beaten Zoran Mamdani in the primary.
So absolutely, no matter what, from now until Election Day, I know I've asked this before, you're in the race.
There is no way I drop out of this race. They've tried to bribe me out of the race. I now have armed security. I've had threats against me and my wife. So what makes them think with less than 3 weeks to go I'm going to drop out now? It's his only hope, which means he's telling his supporters, I can't win, so why should he even bother to get out to vote? Meantime, I got a full get out to vote effort. I got 11 headquarters, signs everywhere, more money than Andrew Cuomo has in matching funds. So why would I get out of the race?
You have to wonder why so many people on the right aren't taking that position. It's not a position that's illogical in the least. The illogical position is to act like Andrew Cuomo is the lesser of two evils. And I'm not endorsing Mamdani. I don't want him to win. I don't want Cuomo to win either. This whole lose-lose situation is disgusting. It's grotesque. We should never have been put in this position in the first place. And I hate situations like this where we could have prevented this. We didn't have to be in this situation. We didn't have to. It wasn't inevitable that we now have to decide between a horrible communist who wants a Muslim New York and a man who essentially killed over 10,000 elderly people because he played the tyrant during COVID and locked them down to the point of their death. We don't have to be in this situation, but it is not morally incumbent on Curtis Sliwa to drop out of the race so that his voters vote for Andrew Cuomo, because that probably wouldn't even work anyway. Andrew Cuomo. The impetus falls on Andrew Cuomo to drop out of this race because, as I said, and as Sliwa noted, if he'd actually run his race right, he would have won the Democrat primary, and he didn't. He didn't. Now, there's also a theory that if Zoran Mamdani does win in New York City, that the net effect on our country as a whole will ultimately be positive down the road, at least when it comes to conservative electoral politics, because it will help Republicans get elected in future elections, because they will see for themselves what a disaster New York has become. You heard, Curtis Sliwa be asked about this theory, and he dismissed it. And I think I understand why Curtis Sliwa dismisses this. However, we did see this happen when it comes to George Soros's Progressive Prosecutor Project. You saw in San Francisco, Chesa Boudin, the very, very radical left, child of domestic terrorists, the Weather Underground spawn. You saw him become DA in San Francisco and refused to prosecute crime, and San Francisco turned into an absolute hellhole as a result of that. Chesa Boudin was actually recalled as district attorney out there because the people of San Francisco were like, what are you doing? And that the effect of that was George Soros's Progressive Prosecutor Project was slowed, it was stalled, it was exposed. So I can understand that argument, but I would never bet on a strategy like that. I would never justify the election of a communist because there might be a silver lining down the road. Because we don't know for a fact that there will be a silver lining down the road, but we do know for a fact that mamdani will embolden the left if he wins to run communist candidates, anti-American candidates in other areas, because they'll think if Zoran did it, we can do it. And we also know for a fact that his communist policies will harm the people of New York City. And I wouldn't sacrifice them on the altar of maybe it will help Republicans because they'll be able to point out that harm and thus win elections in other places. We didn't have to be in this position. We didn't have to let it come to this. You remember Andrew Cuomo's history. This man is the most entitled stereotype of a disgusting, corrupt politician that exists. Cuomo once said, this is in 2014, this is not that long ago, that conservatives have no place in the state of New York. Take a listen to this.
Their problem is not me and the Democrats. Their problem is themselves. Who are they? Are they these extreme conservatives who are right to life, pro-assault weapon, anti-gay? Is that who they are? Because if that's who they are, and if they are the extreme conservatives, they have no place in the state of New York. Because that's not who New Yorkers are.
They have no place in the state of New York because that's not who New York is. So this is really the binary choice that we're being told we have. The choice between a communist who wants to remake New York City in the image of his people, and he identifies as a Muslim, or Andrew Cuomo, who says that you and I have no place in the state of New York. That's not who New Yorkers are. If you are pro-traditional marriage or pro-Second Amendment, that you don't even bother coming to this state. That's the choice. Can't be Christian under Zoran's ideology, can't be conservative under Cuomo's. So maybe, just maybe, it should be Andrew Cuomo who drops out of this race. And listen, I know it sounds cynical when I articulate the voter demographic theory that the indoctrinated youth, this is really a commentary or a reflection on the enormous and dangerous influence of colleges and universities. And I made an argument at the first time we talked about this in the first Zoran Mamdani episode. If you haven't watched it, go watch it. I think it's entitled The Nutty Muslim Marxist Who's About to Win the New York State or the New York City mayoral Democrat or the mayoral primary. Go watch it. And I made the argument that this is not just me sitting here belly aching about the state of our colleges and universities. This is a wake up call for the Trump administration to do something. They actually have the authority to do something about it. You don't have to send federal dollars to universities that are actively teaching young Americans to be anti-American. They're actively indoctrinating youth in communism and Marxism. You don't have to give money, whether that's in the form of federally subsidized student loans, whether that's research grants, whether that's there's a whole host of programs and projects and ways that money is funneled from the federal government to these colleges and universities, even the ostensibly private ones. We're not even talking just about state-run institutions. You don't have to let them do this. And if you squeezed off the money that's coming from the government to these universities, if you just cut it off, the majority of them would close. And so their choice, if President Trump gave them that choice, their choice would be either they change their ways and they start teaching American youth what it means to be American and real history and training them for the workforce, not hardening them into committed Marxist radicals, or you have to close your doors because we're going to cut off your meal train. This is within the authority and the power of the President of the United States and the Department of Education. And by the way, governors in red states, you also have this in your power, and attorneys general and state departments of education. We can do this if we want to stop indoctrinating our youth, because otherwise that number right now seems enormous. 20% of registered voters in New York City are these indoctrinated youth that went through these universities. But that number is going to get higher. It's just going to continue to grow if we don't stop it, where it's starting, where it's coming from. So I don't mean to sound black-pilled when I say, will showing the voters of New York these videos the reality of Zohran Mamdani's political godmother, Linda Sarsour, will showing New York City voters the videos of Zohran Mamdani saying the reason he's here in politics is to remake the image of New York in the image of his people, the people of Islam. Will showing people that make a difference? Well, maybe not if you show that 20%, but there's still 80% who, showing them that video will make a difference. So share this episode. Let them know what's about to be unleashed on them, because we may think they're crazy for who they elect, and they are, but they're still our fellow Americans, and I refuse to write them off.